There are still people in this country in very senior positions who are not willing to say that China is not a friend of ours. They are an adversary of ours.
What if you just don't buy made in China?
Yeah, it's hard to do.
Stuff.
It's really hard to do, and this is also placing a real expectation on a consumer. You know, you're a regular person out there and you're making 50 grand a year. What American car are you gonna buy? What, you know, the TV sets that you have in your house, any electronic device that you have. Do you have an iPhone? All of those are made in China.
A jury on Wednesday found Beijing-based wind turbine maker Sinovel Wind Group guilty of all counts, including conspiracy, trade secret theft, and wire fraud.
You had the trade message of how China and other countries have hollowed out America's industrial base in these towns across the Rust Belt that no longer exist anymore because we have allowed other countries to do all our manufacturing for us. But what they didn't talk about was you're also going to have a crisis of the family across the Midwest of our country. You're going to see a rise of opioids that we're even seeing today.
Every day brings another story about the depth of this country's opioid crisis. Overdoses up, emergency services overwhelmed, another family burying a loved one.
Trump intuitively understood that even as a billionaire. He was a builder, so he's around builders all the time. He was around people that work with their hands all the time and interacted with these people and heard their problems and their concerns and the things that they were scared about. And even if they didn't affect him in some way because he's a billionaire, he understood the importance of those issues.
I mean, what was it like working for him?
I personally don't have a single negative thing to say about having worked for Trump, and I've been sued by the guy at one point, you know?
In the new book, Team of Vipers, My 500 Extraordinary Days in the Trump White House, former White House aide Cliff Sims paints a wild picture from within. The president's re-election campaign now suing Sims for violating his non-disclosure agreement.
I had left the White House and I decided to write a memoir of my time there. So when the book comes out, the president immediately has the false impression that I'm attacking him, that I'm gonna be one of the ones who has now left and is now gonna stab him in the back and say all of these terrible things about him. And so he sued me when the book came out. And so I countersued him on First Amendment grounds and saying that, you know, as a government employee, as long as I don't disclose classified information, you know, I'm not bound by, you know, an NDA basically assigned in the private sector to apply to my time in government service. Personally, I found the characterization as Trump as someone who's just like, you know, he's just the "you're fired" guy.
You're fired.
And is just like flying off the handle and yelling at people and going, you know, wild all the time, to not be my personal experience. If you were willing to say to him, I don't think that's the way we should go, Mr. President, he would be interested to know, why do you think that?
Like, so he does take constructive criticism.
He will definitely engage. Now, he's going to make the decision that he's going to make, but he will engage with you on why do you think that, and, you know, what would lead you to that conclusion, because I'm in a totally different place. One of the early decisions that we had to make in the White House was, are we going to move the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv to Jerusalem? Every president since Ronald Reagan had promised to do it. And every single president prior to Trump reversed course and didn't do it. And I know why.
Why?
I was confronted with the same briefing that all of those other presidents got. You make this decision, and it's going to be mass chaos in the Middle East. And at some point he said, hold on just a second. I think everyone here is confused about there being a debate over whether we're going to do this. I promised I was going to do it, and we're doing it.
Jerusalem was a wonderful thing, and I know it was very much appreciated in a big part of the world. Many presidents were discussing whether or not to make that decision, and they promised it in their campaigns, but they never were able to do what they should have done. So I was able to do it, and I think it's something that's very much appreciated in Israel, but far beyond Israel.
Violent protests continued in the Middle East today over President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
There are people hanging him in effigy. There are people burning the American flag. There are people chanting, Trump, Trump, you will see, Palestine will be free. he is watching this unfold, and I will never forget Trump's reaction to seeing that, though. He watches it for a minute, and then he looks at me and he goes, all right, what do we got next? Didn't even acknowledge this hatred, unimaginable level of hatred happening for the whole world to see, directed at him personally. And it rolled off his back like water off of a duck's back. And I realized in that moment, but if he thinks this is the right thing to do, he will endure any amount of criticism